Yeah. Hi, everyone that's joining us here today. It looks like we've got several of you joining us so far. Welcome. Would love to hear where you're all from. I guess maybe I should probably start. I'm in the New England area of the United States, which is the Northeast. So I'm coming to you live from New England. What about you, Sarah? Where are you calling in from today?
I'm dialing in live here from San Francisco. So about, I've been here for about 5 years now, but in general, I've been living in the Bay Area for the last, 6 years. And before that, I was on the East Coast too. So
Heart of
definitely have
Silicon
some East
Valley.
Coast fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. You're right in the thick of it, which is both exciting and also my experience has always been the fog. The fog is really like doesn't it have a name or something like the Carl, I think, or some
Yeah.
such. So
Yep, it is Carl. Actually, so we have Fleet Week. So in the US, for those that are based in the US, you might see this in some cities. Not all cities have this, but you'll see Fleet Week where you have different jets and different types of planes doing beautiful shows. It's kind of amazing. But this last weekend, Carl rolled in so deep, the fog, Carl rolled in so deep that they canceled Sunday out of the Fleet Week, and yeah, it was such a bummer. But they were better be safe than having anything crazy happen in the skies. So
yeah, for sure. And Edward, I saw that it sounded like Sarah was breaking up on your side. She sounds great on my side, so it might be your connection. Feel free to rejoin us. By all means, would love to get your input today. Uh, Alfredo from Arlington, Texas, beautiful area. Love the barbecue in Texas. I've been a few times, mostly Dallas Fort Worth area, but I've got friends down there, so I always love to visit. Welcome. And let's go ahead and start kicking things off. Tampa, Latha, hopefully everything's okay down there after the hurricane. Gosh, just seeing all the footage and everything. Hope everything's going okay down there. Really glad that you're joining us today, though. Yeah, good. Okay, good.
great.
And of course, the Buccaneers, my homeboy Tom Brady, playing down there as well. So. All right, let me just go ahead and grab the slides here and we'll get things kicked off. So you should be seeing any second now my slides. Perfect. So today we're going to talk about how to ship more secure software. So I am one of your hosts, Keith Hudlett, code scanning architect here at GitHub. Been here for almost a year now, mostly focusing on
Wow.
advanced security and everything really. This is my jam. Today's topic on code scanning and code QL is sort of my expertise and the things that I'm so excited about. Sarah, introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. I can't believe you've been here only a year. It feels like you've been here way longer.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Sarah Khalife. I'm a solutions engineer here at GitHub. I've been here for about 3 years actually, which time just flies by. 3 years and a month actually of this, according as long from this week, it's been 3 years and a month. I actually before that I was a software engineer, worked on cloud platforms, worked on a different set of microservices as well, cloud applications, deploying like Kubernetes and other types of cloud platforms across the board. So I'm more on the developer side, but have definitely gotten to know a lot more about the security side. And I've learned many, many more things because of joining GitHub of what does it really mean to have a secure pipeline when you're developing, as you're coding, as you're doing your work. So I'm very excited to talk to you today, not only from the security aspect, but also from the developer aspect.
Absolutely. And Sarah, it's been great working with you over this period of time so far, just in terms of the things that you've shown and taught me about the Kubernetes space, and also, of course, getting to share some of my passion with you in terms of the security side.
Awesome.
Go ahead, Sarah. I'll let you take these.
Yeah, no worries. So GitHub Learning Journey, this is what we're doing today. We had our first one last week where we talked about the introduction into developer first security. Today, we're actually going to focus a little more, make it a little more scoped down to the code scanning aspect of it. So today, October 13th, we're talking about code scanning essentials. Next week, October 18th, we're actually going to do our part 3 and talk about the benefits of secret scanning and kind of doing a security overview of how do you see your results, how do you see that on the enterprise level, at the org level, and so forth. But today we're focusing on code scanning because it could take a full-blown hour, if not more, to talk about this feature because it's there's so many aspects to it that I think it really goes to show how powerful our platform can be. So
And you know that I could talk about this forever. I mean, it's what I do all day long. So
we bring Keith. We bring Keith to our customers, and he is a straight shooter. Will give you into not only give you information into how CodeQL, which is one of the languages that we're using today, but many other things and how things are working within our platform. So I'm very excited to be here with you, Keith, to just talk about code scanning.
so excited.
Please, okay, so we can bring you here live. So please raise your hand. We'll be able to have conversations. We can have more than one person coming up here with us and just having that conversation live around what does security look like in your world? What are your thoughts around the different components that we'll be chatting about today? So please raise your hands. You'll see that little red raise your hand button. And as you raise your hand, we'll pull you up and bring you into the conversation here. And we actually can have more than one person chatting with us at once. So feel free, do not be shy, join us up here.
Yeah, we've had a bunch of people join us on camera in past sessions. It's always a great conversation to get insights into the challenges you're facing, some of the experiences that Sarah and I have had around, how we worked through those challenges, but also other people here in the audience, right? Like in terms of just folks that have also had those experiences that, just needed to have a chance to talk about it. So this is a great opportunity for that. And of course, kicking things off, the very first question we want to ask about is, what are you all doing for your day jobs? So here I'm going to go ahead and share the results. Let me just stop sharing this one, and then I will go ahead and share those results out. We'd just love to know a little bit about you folks. What roles do you play in your organization? What brought you here? What got you interested in having this conversation with us today? So, Sarah, I know that you said you came from the dev side. I didn't really get into it on my side. As you can probably imagine with my nerdery around code scanning, I came from the security space. I built the DevSecOps program at Thermo Fisher Scientific from the ground up before I joined GitHub. And before all that, I've done security research on the BugCrowd platform, where I was a top 100 researcher, trained at conferences like DerbyCon when it was still being given back in 2017 and 2018.
Oh, yeah.
I've had a lot of fun and interesting experiences in static analysis, vulnerability management, bug bounty hunting, security research. So looks like we have a really healthy group of developers and engineers with us today. We're really glad to have you here. Honestly, none of this is possible without you. So super, super happy to have you here. Management as well, again, leadership, right? It's one of those things that you're making decisions about the products that you're using, about the practices and the processes that your teams are leveraging. And then, of course, the security and operations. I love that we have one. It's complicated, by the way. Tell us more. And if you want to join us on camera to tell us why it's complicated, we'd love to have you join us as well. Because yeah, sometimes you're in those organizations and it's complicated.
Very, very true.
All right. So now that we have a sort of an understanding of who's with us today, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that poll, and then we'll go ahead and share those slides again. So just go to that window tab. So we're going to dive into code scanning essentials today. So code scanning is the static analysis solution as part of GitHub Advanced Security. And so we do have, before we kick everything off, another poll for you specifically about that. I know, a little bit of whiplash, back-to-back polls, but we did want to ask, do you run static application security testing tools or a tool today at any time during the lifecycle? We'll have a follow-up question for those of you that are. So let me just go ahead and share the results out for this one, but I'd love to get a sense of sort of where you folks are today with static analysis. And honestly, Sarah, I've heard, and maybe you can give your experience as well, I've heard mixed results on static analysis, right? Some teams are like, we don't use it because it's just garbage. Other teams are like, man, we couldn't live without it. What has been the things that you've seen? What has been your experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Great question. In many cases, I would say there are different ranges of where we're putting our static analysis, or SCA, or DAST, or SAS, all of the fun coin terms. But there's so many aspects where it's not necessarily in the developer day-to-day work, even though we consider it part of the developer flow. It's not necessarily in the day-to-day work. So what do I mean by that? A lot of the times, the security tooling that I worked with, we were doing it in pre-prod, in staging, in the testing QA phases, not necessarily hitting it at the developer time, where as developers are contributing code, making code changes. So that's where my experience has sat. And it's not always an easy one because it's a little bit late. It makes it harder for me to remember what I worked on 2-3 weeks ago, if not months ago. So it can vary. I would love to hear more from the audience. What does it look like for you? And if you want to come up on camera with us to talk about it.
We actually do
Feel
have
free to.
someone joining us on camera as well. This was the individual who wrote "It's Complicated" in the previous poll. So first, forgive me, allow me to make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Nicolaus?
Nick. You can call me Nick.
Nick, very nice to meet you.
Where are you
Welcome.
from, Nick?
Yeah, where are you from? Tell us about your role and why it's complicated.
Actually, I am from Greece, but I live in UK.
Okay. Nice.
I'm actually Greek too, so.
Excellent. So I was working for a company, but unfortunately, I got laid off during my probation.
That's unfortunate. Yeah. So it's complicated because you were in a role and now you're not.
Basically, now I am doing some Linux essentials, and then I'm looking, for AWS, but as well as be more proficient with Git, like branching and security and everything. So that's why I'm attending the live show.
Awesome. Well, welcome. We're really glad to have you here. And it sounds like you're definitely going down the right path with some of the things that you're looking into. And Git is, I'll tell you, it's funny. There are teams that I worked with at Thermo Fisher that were working in Subversion. And as soon as you taught them about like the way that you could do branching in Git, and they were just like, what?
Like you could, this is a whole new world.
I was looking basically in some courses in Udemy, but they're not really popular. So I'm just looking for any sources, actually, any type of resources like labs and plays and anything to test my skills, basically.
Absolutely. And there's a ton of like open source training solutions, and even like I always love the awesome dash some topic repositories that you'll see being really popular, because they tend to have like a lot of free training materials and open source repositories that you can work with as well. So Nick, reach out. I'm securingdev@github.com. I'll see if I can gather some interesting things, and then we'll send them over to you in an email, so that way you have some more things that you can dig into. And best of luck in the job search. Honestly, this is a hot market. I'm sure you'll find something very soon. And
that's why I just said Linux essentials, AWS, Git. I will get something. And the thing is, I just today automated my updates for my Linux machine, my virtual machine. So it was my first, but it wasn't like Python. It was just a shell, just a simple shell script.
That's where you start, and that's how you can do a lot of things.
I'll push it now to my Git page.
There you go. And then there you go. Well, Nick, welcome. We're going to keep things moving here, but really glad to have you here with us today.
Excellent.
So with that being said, we're going to keep moving here. I'm going to go ahead and share back the screen that I had there with some of the slides, and we're going to dig into this a little bit. So in terms of security, that's not the one I want. This is the one I want. Here we go. So a few things. You should be seeing that poll. So in terms of security, we see today that 15% is the number of vulnerabilities that are fixed after 7 days. And that's an industry norm. I think that honestly, Sarah, this is why so many security professionals get sort of like they lose their hair, like sort of like, me, or perhaps, Nick as well, who had a nice clean cut there. But then also, at the end of the day, it's part of the challenge of getting security results later in the cycle. And the sort of scary thing is, when it comes to this, you look at how this sort of evolves, right? 45% of vulnerabilities fixed after 90 days is the norm. And it's no wonder why we see security incidents taking place. I don't know if in some of the customers that we've talked to, this felt like it was pretty normal. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, I would say so. I like sometimes to flip the numbers and think about even 55% of the vulnerabilities that you have discovered have not been fixed at all within that year or within those first couple of months. So it's actually pretty crazy to think about. We have all this information, but not necessarily remediating as fast as we could, even though we're learning so much more. For me, it's been, I would say there have been many cases where a lot more of our vulnerabilities were not fixed within those 3 months because we had 3-month deployment cycles. So we had to work on 5 different features, 5 different projects, 5 different components before we even get to those 3 months. And then we're scanning right before production. We're not necessarily scanning earlier on. So I wholeheartedly have seen this in my own experience. But to think about, even if we're reversing that number, 55% more vulnerabilities are still existing is mind blowing in my mind.
Absolutely. And Richard, you made a really interesting comment in the chat, and it's a really good point. It's hard to present this metric without including criticality. You're right. If you want to speak more to that, would love to get you on camera with us. Would love to get your take on it, because in my experience, you're right. I mean, if you think of critical vulnerabilities that need to be remediated, oftentimes that is around your, say, 15, 25-ish%, depending on the application age and so on. So would love it, again, all you have to do is click the raise hand button, and then what will allow us to do is bring you on camera if you want to join us on camera, because I'd love to get that take. And then of course the other side of it though is we will talk a little bit about some of the differences we've seen with code scanning in terms of that time to remediate and the time to address. So while we're waiting to see if Richard is going to join us on camera, I'm going to go ahead and kick us over to our next poll, which is for those of you that you do run static analysis in your environment today. So if you had the answer that you did not, feel free to the mark that it's complicated, I think is one of the answers on this poll. But let me go ahead and share this poll really quick as well. So just a second here. And it looks like Richard did raise their hand as well. So Richard, I'm going to go ahead and bring you on camera with us, and then we'll also share the poll as well. Richard, tell us more, right? Like, I agree with you that criticality is sort of one of those important things to discuss when it comes to remediation rate. Give us your thoughts.
Oh, there we go. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're great.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, just simply that, like a metric without context around the criticality. Although I don't know that it's that much better, but I imagine not 100% critical vulnerabilities are patched within 7 days. Although I imagine policies and standards within many companies are to patch critical vulnerabilities within, I don't know, 7 to 30 days, probably is what I've seen.
Sure.
But it's hard to achieve those.
Yeah, you're right. And it's funny. So when I was working at Thermo Fisher Scientific, the challenge that we had is the Food and Drug Administration in the United States required you to remediate, like, I think it was almost all vulnerabilities within 60 days, like regardless of criticality, or at least have a mitigation on that. So you bring up a really, really good point. We will bring a point about the timing of patching and remediation later, which I think will happen after this poll. But yeah, most companies will have some sort of timeline, and to the point that I think you're making, some companies just don't have the bandwidth to fix it in that time frame. The application could be really old, and so therefore really complex. Go ahead, Sarah.
Or really complex. I was just going to say that you already might. It's complex, and maybe the individuals that have been working on it don't necessarily know how to fix it. So I think that's the other problem. So we have both from the security point of view and the developer point of view. From the security point of view, it's like, hey, we have these policies. We want to make sure that you're fixing these within this especially if they're critical. We want to make sure you're fixing them within a specific time period. But in many cases, as a developer, you don't really understand why is this critical? Why do I need to fix it? And how do I fix it is the other question. Like, I know what some vulnerabilities may mean to an extent, but you don't always understand how you jump into these vulnerabilities, and you're supposed to know how to fix them because you never learned that in college. You never learned it as a individual starting off your job as a software engineer. So I think those points are very, very great aspects of understanding when you're finding these vulnerabilities and how you're fixing them. But at the same time, we also have to look at this developer metric of how fast can the developer fix it, because how much do they know how to fix it? It's not necessarily always one-to-one.
Richard, we'll let you get back to your breakfast or lunch, not really sure what, but I hope you enjoy it. And then we're going to keep moving. I do want to just share the results on the poll though here as well. So let's see here. So poll for, if you're running it today, for those not currently, I think this was actually the previous one. Whoops, I want to share this one, which is for those of you that are running static analysis today. is it as developers push code? It looks like a majority of you would like to do that as they're pushing code to your version control system for security scanning. Some with every pull request or every commit. Awesome. Really glad to hear that as well. And would love to get, some of you on camera with us today to discuss that experience if you're interested. So by all means, just remember to raise hand when you do that. We'd love to get your take here. We are going to keep moving a little bit because I did want to share as sort of a caveat to the previous slide that I shared around percentage of remediation and timeframes, which what we see actively within the open source community is this. 72% of vulnerabilities discovered on pull request are remediated in that pull request with CodeQL and the code scanning solution, which is, I think, that importance, right? I mean, the 15% in 7 days versus 72% within some measure of minutes of a pull request being opened is significant. And I don't know, Sarah, about you, but my guess as to why this is because of the context switching challenges. And you mentioned that a little bit earlier. Do you want to speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think as you're introducing new code changes into your pull request, you have the right context of what you're bringing in as a code change. So what I mean by that, I understand what I just built. So if you tell me at that point in time, this specific component that you just added into the code base is vulnerable, now I have a better understanding of how to actually fix it, because I have a fresh mindset of exactly what I did and how maybe I can work around it to make that vulnerability vulnerability fix and make that update into the code change within that pull request. It's been many cases where I had to go into like 2 different tools, jump into my Jenkins instance, then run the scan, then jump into the previous tools that we were using in my previous job, jump into that tool's UI to see the results. It wasn't always as seamless as getting the results in the pull request. And even if you get the results in the pull request, making that scope down to what you're specifically changing is, I think, the key aspect in this conversation here.
Absolutely. And we will show you folks what that looks like here shortly. So don't worry, just stand by for that because Sarah will actually show you some of that. So
walk through that.
Where does this all fit, right? What we're talking about here is just one piece of several pieces within the advanced security product suite, which is specifically that code scanning static analysis aspect, right? It happens on a Git push. It's integrated into the development workflow. But for a lot of people, especially the security people watching this, they're probably like, but it's static analysis. Like, it's been a challenge over the last 2 decades for this. And you're not wrong. In fact, I wrote a blog post about exactly this topic on my personal blog. It's just securing.dev. You can go out and look at the category for static analysis. But if you look at the space over the last 2 decades, a little bit more than that, but I just like to, shave it down to 2 decades. It's really 3 types. You have reading the recipe, which is that semantic or static code analysis, really shallow data flows, sort of looking across all of the individual elements of the code. Ran into challenges with really large code bases because you're trying to hold it all in memory at the same time. And then you had like this evolution around 2006, which I call trying the cake, which is that binary static analysis. Full disclosure, I used to work at a company called Veracode that does this. And that's really, don't care about the compilation process, don't care about the recipe, just give me the cake, I will try it, and I will tell you what is wrong. Also runs into its own challenges because you don't understand the data flow of the application until you walk it. And so you've got to spend time on that, but you can't spend all of your time on that if it's a really large, complex application, because you eventually have to get to the security analysis. So you miss things. And then, of course, there's the newest sort of evolution of this, as I like to think of it, which is what we do with code scanning. And I call that being the baker, or comprehensive static analysis. And I'll go into this on the next slide a little bit, but we hook into your compilation process for your compiled applications, which allows us then to map the data flows that your compiler is making, building nodes inside of a database for callbacks, linkers getting created, and what have you. And then we map the code on top of it because you're working in GitHub. And so we're where your code lives. All the expressions, variables, classes, methods, functions, what have you, are all mapped as nodes inside of that database. And because we have perfect visibility into that process of how the data flows through your application, we can give you really high fidelity, really accurate, and also, by the way, exploitable results inside of your static analysis process, which tends to cut down on a lot of that noise, which I think Sarah will show here momentarily, as well as giving you things that are sort of worth focusing on. This is my favorite, but also very simple analogy. Again, I've written a blog series on this if you want to get technical, but specifically to CodeQL. The engine itself, again, it's intended to analyze that code as data. So for interpreted applications, I'll give that sort of contrast here. We're effectively pseudo-compiling your code, by which I mean we're doing a depth-first recursive read to understand all of those pieces of your code and writing them into a database. And as we see calls being made to various functions or variables, we build data flow nodes inside of that database to allow us to understand how everything connects together. That allows us, and you, if you decide to write custom queries, to refine that analysis to remote flow sources as opposed to local sources. The reason that I think people hate static analysis, Sarah, is because local sources are those operating system arguments, environment variables, configuration or properties files, that if those things can get exploited, you probably have a different problem.
Yep.
So,
and it results kind of to a false positive in that sense, right? At least from my point of view, I don't think that's necessarily always exploitable. And if it is, like you said, it's from a different actual issue that you already have to remediate. But yeah, I completely agree on that.
And to that point, like if I can modify a configuration or properties file, well, that means that I've probably compromised a developer's account. I can write to your main branch without a code review. Like I could do a lot worse than changing a database table name to introduce SQL injection. I'm probably going to do a lot worse in that scenario. Same thing with like operating system arguments and environment variables, because if I can control those things on your application, it means I have control of the running system that your application is depending on. I'm probably just going to ransomware the system as a hacker because that's the fastest way to make money. Again, different problem from a static analysis context. So Gunnar, you ask a really good question in the chat. I will link a link to a blog post that we just came out with our Serif viewer, which is a Microsoft integration into VS Code that I think you'll really enjoy. So we'll get a link for that. So stay tuned on that front. But also the important thing that I think that comes out of all of this is that shared security knowledge. Putting these findings and putting all of this information where the developers live in their development process allows them to see it much faster, to understand it much quicker, to get it in context, to the point that you made earlier, Sarah, and then work on it and remediate it. So to that point, it is important to know that we do have a lot of shared security expertise. There are over 1,700 queries out of the box available to you, including some of which I've written some open source queries for as that added community powered layer that will give you that sort of power out of the box to find exploitable vulnerabilities very, very quickly. The other sort of neat thing that has happened is because all of our queries are open source. If you go to github.com/github/CodeQL, you can dive into the CodeQL solution that we provide. You can look at the queries that we've written.
And we can even show that in the live demo too.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. Please do.
Because right on the page.
It's out there, right? Yeah, it's public. And the nice thing though is that custom layer, because we have customers that want to say, okay, like I don't really care about this particular finding, or maybe the criticality of this particular finding is lower for my environment. We can go ahead and Edward, actually next week, we will talk about secret scanning, by the way, next week. So I saw your comment on the chat around secrets and config files coming next week. Stay tuned. But that being said, the customization, super powerful. Paulino Calderon is someone that I greatly admire, works on the Nmap project, for those of you familiar with network security. And he wrote a really nice, really clean open source query for CodeQL for the Log4j vulnerability less than 24 hours after that was publicly exposed on Twitter. I mean, super powerful, helped customers know that, where to start remediating or running incident response, and clean that sort of noise to signal ratio right up, which is just totally awesome. And Sarah, I know that with some of the customers, we've worked with together, custom query writing is a really powerful tool. I'm not familiar with any other tools that do that, but let's talk about that experience that your customers have seen in terms of just custom query writing. What have they said to you about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Keith. I think the main aspect of it is because we can customize them, and it's not like a black box anymore. You can see exactly what's going on. You can see exactly how the query is being written. A lot of my customers have taken the base queries that we've provided and added a lot more configurations to those queries to make it specific to their scenario. Customers have the ability to take information from the queries that we've provided and customize them, which many other tools didn't necessarily provide them that flexibility. So what they would do, they'll have the core packs that they wanted to use from our existing provided GitHub powered queries that we provided, but they also created some community ones that they found that were very helpful for them. One of them was like the Solari Gate attack vulnerability scanner query built by Microsoft, and then they'll take some of the other custom ones that they've created and build another query pack. So then they have different layers of queries that they will be running for different types of tooling. They'll be running it for different types of criticalities, actually, is one main example where they wanted to only run queries against the critical vulnerabilities that they're looking for the pull request, so they don't have to bog down the developer for many other things. But then every night or every once a week or once a month, however they wanted to handle it, they'll run the rest of the query packs that were available to them.
Yeah, and to the point that Dunya is making in the chat as well, if you want to talk more about this with us, by all means, book a meeting. It's a button right at the top of the window. We have these kind of conversations on a regular basis with our customers and people that are interested in understanding the product. So would love to deep dive on that with some of you folks. And by all means, request me by name if you'd like. So the important thing, though, is this is a platform, and GitHub, as for many of you that have worked in it for some time would know, has a lot of integrations. And any solution that can output to the static analysis results interchange format or serif format, as long as you have advanced security turned on, if you want that security tool to also pull in additional information for some niche framework or language that maybe we don't cover for some reason, or maybe you have additional dynamic analysis tools like the OWASP Z-Attack proxy that also outputs to serif format. Effectively, it's fancy JSON in sort of the way that I've looked at it, is you can ingest that information in ways that feel really native to your development experience, which is a really powerful way to get security in front of your developers where they're working in a context and a time frame that is relevant to them and allows them to get that 72% remediation rate on pull request. So we're going to kick off one more poll, and then Sarah, we're going to have you go into that demo, so get that ready. But the next poll is, should developers have access to security results, especially the results generated by static analysis application or static application security testing tools while developing? Would love to get your take on this as well. Let me go ahead and share that out so we can get the results here. And if any of you have very strong opinions about this, would love to get you on camera with us. So by all means, please just raise your hand. We'd love to understand sort of your take on this. So far, we have 4 very strong votes for yes. Perhaps maybe just like casually strong votes. I'm projecting. We have 1, it's complicated. Would love to, whoever has decided to throw their hat in the ring of it's complicated to share their thoughts on camera with us. So by all means, just please raise your hand. I'm surprised that we don't have any no's, because I don't know, Sarah, like I've been in security teams where it's one of those situations of like, they don't want developers to have results until they've had a chance to look at things.
Yeah, I've seen the last like 5 or 6 years, we've moved more to having more of a shared responsibility. So it doesn't surprise me that the answers are not no. I'm seeing in the chat why Richard, it might be you're the one saying complicated. I can see why you only want to show what's relevant to the developer. And I agree with that. I think sometimes it can be very overwhelming. I think it's sometimes way too much information for me to comprehend half of the things that I'm reading. But at any given point in time, I think I should always have access to the results that I'm at least running for my applications, because it's a shared responsibility. It's not just the developers working to fix the vulnerability. It's not just the security researchers finding these vulnerabilities. We kind of have to work together for us to understand what we need to fix and how we should be fixing it, and how fast should we be fixing it. And hopefully a pull request is the answer to most of those questions.
For sure. All right. I know that we've been keeping people waiting for this for a little while now, Sarah. let's jump into the demo. I'm going to stop sharing the poll here so that you can go ahead and share. I think the window is the middle option on the share. So you'll get like screen, window, and then
Great. Yeah. Let me just share my window here. Can everybody see it?
Looks like it's not pulling up yet. We will.
Let me try one more time.
Hopefully it's not like a Chrome thing, but I don't imagine it would be.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that's not happening. It's just at an error. I'm going to retry that.
Sure. If it doesn't work for some reason, I'm always happy to pull open a screen and let you guide me through it as well. If you have a preferred repo that you'd like me to go to, just shoot me a message.
Yeah, so it might be some Chrome setting.
It's all good. It's all good.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Live demos.
Live demos, folks. This is this
Okay.
is why we love to do these things live, though, because you get this experience, which is like why is this not sharing? One of my favorite ones that I love to go to for our repos. So for those of you who have not had conversations with us in the past, we have a an organization called Octodemo, which is some of them are public repositories, but it is our demonstration organization for this. So I have pulled up, and I should be sharing here momentarily my screen for Octodemo, specifically for a vulnerable GitHub Advanced Security application. All right, Sarah, where am I going? I'm a developer. I've got like this repo that I'm working in. What should I be looking for?
This is a great place to just start and understand what we've actually made changes to. So you see there's already dependent about vulnerability alert right here in front of you. So these are for vulnerable dependencies that you have. But if you look at the top of the set of the menus there, you will see the security tab. I think that security tab, if you haven't necessarily noticed it, if you haven't had many vulnerabilities in your code, which is great, but it is there now. And I think you'll see a lot of that for Dependabot. When you have advanced security enabled for your org, you'll also see for code scanning and secret scanning. You'll see similar tabs for the organization, not only for the repository. So yes, if we can jump into code scanning, I would love to walk through that section here. So here's where we can really talk about both developer and security researcher point of views. As a developer, here are all the vulnerabilities specifically related to this repository. I don't have to go into a different tool. I don't have to kick off. There's already automated scans happening, so I don't have to usually manually kick off a scan. They're all usually automated within the pull request process, but you can see exactly all of the results, what branches, what tools, what severities, and you can filter down on that. With these vulnerabilities here, why we mentioned different tools is because Keith mentioned it earlier on. We're not one platform serves everybody the exact same way. The gratifying aspect of this is that we are community based. Our security setup, our security capabilities are all based on the community. Not only are we providing CodeQL as part of the community, but we're also working with different vendors, different tools, different ecosystems to bring in the right tool for you for your scenario. Not one enterprise has the exact same way to accomplish everything. If we can jump into one of the results, actually. So the query built from user-controlled sources on the third one down.
Okay, yep.
That query built from user-controlled sources. I mean, what does that mean? In my mind, I had no idea what that meant. As a developer, you understand a couple of things here and there. Maybe it's a SQL injection, maybe it's cross-site scripting, maybe it's something else. I really didn't know what that meant. But the first thing you notice are not only the results of where it's being introduced and where it's being exploited, but also the description right below, where you can see if a database query is built using string concatenation, so forth and so forth. In other words, it's a SQL injection or Java persistence query injection. If we can click on show more, actually, Keith, there on the description side, because it's such a common vulnerability that is an easy mistake to make, you can see that there are recommendations, examples, there are linked to the sources, and these examples show you what is bad and what is good. What is a way to develop this the specific component within your code change? What's a way to write this SQL scanner in this case to make sure that you're linting and you're validating and you're cleaning up your code, your results before you actually are using them. So if we're getting back, Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I don't know if you're going to go into the show paths, but that's actually my favorite part. So by all means, if that's where you're going, keep going.
That is exactly where I was going, Keith. Actually, I think you read this is actually one of my favorite parts too. So if you can click on show paths, in this example here, you can see from step 1 where the source is being introduced. So the string name, you can see the data flow of how this is traversing through your code all the way to step 8, because in this case, there's 8 steps, that's where it's being exploited. So this is basically, there's no sanitization of the query coming in. So when you are executing it, they could have had a SQL injection or Java persistence query injection and easily could have made your web application, whatever this may be, vulnerable. In this step through, oh yeah, go ahead, Keith.
What I really like is you can see that they tried to do some very light replacement, and what this has detected is that light replacement of single quotes is still exploitable. And SQL injection is my favorite attack vector, so I'm so glad you chose this one, because yeah, absolutely. Like, well, I'm just gonna put like a slash in front of my quote, and boom, suddenly I've got like my escaped quote back. So,
and you know what? As a developer, everything you just said to me before I joined GitHub, before I even used advanced security, I would not have understood what you meant. Being able to see the data flow and how this is actually being exploited made it so much easier. So now I can go back into what step was that? Step number 7 or 6, and actually create a good sanitization of the results of the query that we're receiving in. So we can actually change step number 7 to actually do a better sanitization that it's somewhat trying to do. And here's where, as a developer, I can go back into this step and fully understand, okay, cool, I walked through all these steps, now I know where it is. And before we actually jump out of this, if you can do that drop down where it says 8 steps, because there's actual multiple paths. So in this example here, there are 6 different paths that produce the same vulnerability. So there may be 6 different sources that all are being exploited at the same sync. So, yep.
And the way that it flows through too, like, so the request parameters, it looks like, are both being highlighted across steps, but then it looks like the various functions that they specifically tie to are slightly different. And so it's one finding for effectively 8 different areas that, oh, by the way, if you just validate inputs on this step, you've probably solved for.
Yep, exactly. You can figure out where to find the common denominator and you fix it at the common denominator. I think that's the real value in this. You find the common denominator across all 6 paths and say, okay, step one or step 6 or step 8 might be the place I should be fixing these vulnerabilities.
And I always like to say, especially like most security tools in my experience will tell you to validate right before this step, right? They'll say, look at the full query, do a validation of the full query, and then determine if there's a way to validate or sanitize it, so that way you can run that safely. Yes, like I think that's a good idea to do it here at the execution step, but I always come back to the inputs in your application might be used for features that you haven't even dreamed up yet. And so if you fix here or you validate here as well, you suddenly get that ability to solve future state problems that you haven't even anticipated.
Yeah, unanticipated paths in this case.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great point. I never even thought about that. Yeah, let's move over to the next step. So I wanted to scroll down to the bottom of this page before we jump into what it will look like in a pull request, to go to where there's an audit of information of what happened to this vulnerability. I think this is valuable for a lot of security researchers and developers as well, but mainly the security teams, to be able to have this conversation with the developer. You can see where it was first committed. You can see what branch it appeared in and when. I think that's so valuable from a security researcher point of view, because you fully understand exactly what happened to this vulnerability, where it might have been deployed, because the main branch in this case might be the production branch, or it might be the dev branch, it might be this, it might be that. So you actually have a full understanding where it was committed, where it was first detected, and what commits it was associated to, so then you can do a trace back into your code base or back into your deployments. So I think this is great from both security researcher and developer point of view. So if we could go back into an example of a pull request, actually, because
right.
we talked so much about context switching. There's a pull request somewhere in there that's talking about specific the SQL injection that's happening. I think it was opened by Niels. Yep, there. Oh, by
This
Felix. Yes, that one. Yeah, that one works too, actually. These are all great examples of what that will look like from both a developer point of view. How do you integrate it in the developer flow, but also how do you get that information back and forth and maintain that open conversation?
Let me go to the one with Niels real quick, because Niels might have that back and forth as well. So here's the one from Niels. So yeah, it looks like here you have conversations happening about the vulnerability as well. So you have in that first sort of like I don't even know the right way to put this, but it's like a person that has a seat at the table. You have this automated security experience.
Yeah.
Just like everything else that's happening here.
Yeah, so you in this example here, Niels is introducing new code changes. We're coming in and we're having a conversation with Kevin, with Max, with Kevin again, trying to understand how Kevin can help, or how actually Niels can help Kevin in this case because he didn't really understand, or how Moose can help Kevin. So you actually have that open conversation. And I think this falls back to our developer experience being at its core collaboration. And I think a pull request is a great example. It's when you as a developer are introducing new code changes. That's when you're ready to show the rest of your team, hey, I want to introduce this change. I finished all my thought process. This is what I want to merge into my main branch or into my production branches. Let's go. But this is when you're also open to feedback. So this is, again, the best place to introduce scanning and vulnerability alerts all in one go, because there is that desire to receive feedback and to have that conversation. And this is where you can bridge that gap where I was mentioning between security and your developers, because you can have that open conversation. You can see exactly what happened. And if you actually keep going through, there are a couple aspects where they're highlighting multiple lines and different conversations and where things have been introduced specifically within the pull request.
And if you're a security person like me, you can go in and say, yes, like, love the fact that you
Let's talk about
it. Let's talk about this.
It's actually such a big deal, because this is where also, if you think about it, if I'm a new person coming into the team and I don't know the developer flow that we're following, or maybe my previous team was a different type of setup, you can go into these old pull requests, actually see exactly what happened in them, because all of these are not only Git changes, they're also pull requests. So therefore there's all the history within those at GitHub. So you can actually go into these old pull requests and see exactly what happened to that change. As a new developer, I know this is actually providing some transparency. I know exactly what CodeQL queries I need to run. I see some grep is required here, or not required, but wanted to be part of the pull request process. So there's so much opportunity here to produce a standard for your developers to understand these are the things that you need to do before you merge your code. And it makes it, this is the best place, a more transparent place that you can provide that in.
Awesome. Sarah, was there anything else you wanted to demo? Because I had one thing I wanted to share as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's the main aspects I wanted to show. We can always talk more about this. So again, feel free to jump on a call with us. We will gladly talk about this any day.
Yeah, just click that book a meeting link right there at the top as well, and set up a time with Sarah, myself, other members of the field security or solutions engineering team. We're always happy to have conversations about this. Earlier, Sugna, you did ask about seeing this information in the IDE. Well, we had a blog post that just came out. I'm going to link this in the chat so you can have access to it as well. But Microsoft had produced a tool called a Serif Viewer, Static Analysis Results Interchange Format Viewer. And this allows you, with the Serif Viewer, to pull in the information from GitHub back into your IDE to then be able to work through that experience. And in fact, they have a demo of that. It's about a little less than 4 minutes to see what that experience looks like in Codespaces, which is if you have a unified development experience in that Codespaces space that you've set up for your team inside of that repository, automatically just gets pulled in. You can just have those results at your fingertips of your developers. So they're working almost entirely in their IDE at that point, which is a super, super powerful way to do this.
I want to play a little developer, a little devil's advocate here.
Please.
If you're finding the results within the IDE, I think that can be helpful. But at the same time, that's not when I as a developer, that I am not ready to receive those types of points just yet. there are some aspects of getting alerts in the IDE makes it easier to maybe make some fixes here and there, but my thought process is not complete till I'm ready to create that pull request. So a lot of the times, yes, it's helpful to get that information, but I don't think it should be enforced in the IDE. I think it should be enforced at the pull request level. So I think that's where I'm playing a little devil's advocate here, because I think the IDE integration is amazing and it's great and helpful, especially if you're writing code QL queries. When you're customizing them, I think that's great. But as a developer, if I'm in the middle of my thought process of how I'm going to configure this feature to be the best feature that it can, I don't want to constantly get alerts all around my one way of doing certain things. I just want to get that at the end of the day and then work through it. Or maybe I'll learn through that and kind of get enforced at the time of the pull request. So then it's not necessarily breaking my flow from day to day.
You're absolutely right.
That's my devil's advocate side of things.
Your devil's advocate is, in my experience, and the things that there's been research from Google, from Facebook before they became Meta, from other companies that absolutely you're right. And the practical example I like to give there, and I live this experience because I'm often the one doing it, is when someone interrupts the conversation that you're having and you lose your train of thought.
Yeah,
that is exactly how like an IDE based scanner can be really disruptive to the developer experience, because you're right, development is a creative process. We call it, an engineering or a science, but let's be real, like you're inventing something. Art. Yeah, it's an art. And so you're right. And the nice thing that I like about the Seraph viewer is it gives you the results back inside of your IDE in a nice way so that you can sort of very cleanly work through those problems, but it's not actively scanning into IDE. It is truly at that pull request level. So super important caveat there. Sugna, would love to have more conversations with you on that if you want to book a meeting with us, because there's nuance there, right? And I always come back to, like, you don't want to have your sort of thought process interrupted as you're working toward how you solve this complex problem that you're trying to solve for programmatically. So I know that we do have one more poll, I believe, or we have a question and a poll. We've got 9 minutes. Would love to get some of you up on camera with us. So let me go ahead and just share screens again. So we do have that one question that we want to go ahead and put out there, and hopefully someone will raise their hand to join us, which is, what's the biggest barrier that you have to making static analysis scans a true first-class citizen in your developer workflow? Again, by all means, if you don't want to come on camera, please answer in the chat. We'd love to get your sort of hot takes on this. But if you want to join us on camera, just raise your hand. We'll be happy to have you join us and talk about this a little bit, because we have a few minutes. And
yeah, would love
Sarah,
to get your take, because I have a lot of customers that have many barriers. But
yeah,
go
I
ahead,
mean,
Keith.
for me, I think the hardest thing that I've seen in this sort of last 2 decades has really been the quality of the results, has been the barrier, and would love to get other teams as well. So we have Jai asking a question in the chat, actually, which is they use Azure DevOps today and their teams own the platform. They don't own static scans, but another team does, and they use Veracode. We're curious about CodeQL since it's so integrated into the GitHub Enterprise. Possible future state for them as well. So since I once worked at Veracode, what could be the top 3 or 5 things that I can think of that makes CodeQL better than Veracode?
Wow,
Jai, the check is in the mail, right? Great question, right? Used to work there. I actually built the test suite automation for the Red Hat Enterprise Linux 5.4 platform for Veracode's binary static analysis engine. So the biggest difference between the two solutions, I'm going to stop sharing here the question. So the biggest difference is that with Veracode, they don't have access to the code and they don't have access to your compilation process. So because of that, we had to manually walk the data flow, which is why we ask you to put debug flags turned on inside of your application, so that we can sort of walk through every step of the data flow to try and determine how your data flow acts and how your application receives information and sort of where it goes. The problem with that is, algorithmically, sometimes we'll step through the abstract syntax tree on the left, or sometimes we'll go right. And that's not always going to happen the exact same way every time. So that's sort of the first challenge. The second challenge is, especially with large applications, that data flow could be very large. And so if you have a very large data flow, well, I might not get all the way through it. I have to stop at some point at some predefined amount of time in order to get to the security analysis, which is why between releases, I might see 400 new Java vulnerabilities one month that suddenly disappear again the next month. It's not because we fixed them. And it's not because the engine got any better or worse. It's that the data flow was maybe cut off or navigated in a slightly different way than we had before. And so I always say when it comes to static analysis, there's sort of three things. Well, some people will say there's four things, which is usually price is the fourth thing. But the three things that I go back to is speed, accuracy, and completeness. And the things that are reading the recipe have speed and some accuracy. The things that do binary static analysis have accuracy and some completeness. The thing that code scanning has, because we're limited by your build time, is complete data flow. So we have absolute accuracy, or rather completeness, and then accuracy because we understand the difference between a local source and a remote flow source. So your volume of findings is going to be a lot cleaner as well. So it's a really, really great question. I'd strongly encourage you to book a meeting with us because I'd love to go deeper with you and actually show you that experience and talk to you, probably under NDA, about some of my experiences that I've had practically in terms of very specific scenarios. So really, really good question. And to the point that Sugna has made, dynamic analysis is actually a very different process. So I mentioned my blog earlier, and I will just share a link in the chat because I think that you folks will find it valuable. But I wrote an entire series on what I call the DevSecOps Essentials. And I'll link that in the chat because I think that you'd find it interesting to understand sort of where these things sit. I wrote that based on my experience building a DevSecOps program at a Fortune 100 company, and very, very different sort of mindset around where to put that, why it matters, and how valuable it can be to you.
Yeah, I think that's a great blog. Also, just wanted to really plug in our ecosystem again. So again, we're not one way solves everything. CodeQL is one of the best tools I think that's out there, but it's not going to be every person's, every company's, every organization's tool to use every single day. There are many different tools and many different partners in our ecosystem that collaborate seamlessly. So you get that same experience with our partners and ecosystems as part of this platform. And I think that's the biggest value add, because there are people that are, so I actually just met one of our partners yesterday, 42 Crunch, and they are building a way to do static analysis of your API. And I can't give it as much justice as they can, but at the same time, that plays back into DAS. That is what is DAS end goal. It's penetration testing, understanding what's going on at runtime with your API, all the different endpoints that you're hitting. But they're doing static analysis with an API, which is very different than I've seen other places too. But because of that, and their results are in Serif, you can easily ingest that and get those results at the same time. So I think there's different plays that we can talk about here, and we'll love to continue chatting about this. But I know we're close to our end of our time. So I don't know if there's any other polls and questions that we wanted to share, Keith.
So I was going to skip our last poll just because I don't think we have time for it. But to your point, Sarah, yes, that's the real value, I think, of the platform that we offer is you can get a lot of native solutions of what we provide within GitHub Advanced Security, static analysis, secret scanning, software composition analysis, or dependency checking. But you can then pull in via Serif format dynamic analysis tools that are output into Serif, such as 42 Crunch's outcomes, as well as others. And there's a lot of opportunity to think of. The analogy I like to use is security has traditionally been an ambulance driver, or sometimes thought of as an ambulance chaser inside of companies. They find a critical problem, drive it to the hospital, drop it off, and drive away to find another critical problem. And by then it's usually too late for you to make like healthy changes to the application on a regular basis. We're making security a first-party citizen inside of this experience and building them a wing in the hospital that they're there for those moments, but then they're also sort of continuously there. They get healthy, stay healthy, long-term health and well-being of your applications. All right, I'm going to share just two things here because I know that we're coming up on time. The first is coming up, and Edward, you set us up for this perfectly, so thank you very much for that. Next Tuesday, I believe, the 18th, we're going to be talking about secret scanning. I mean, that's everything to do with the secrets inside of your ecosystem. So please join us for that. Sarah and I will be back. And then we are looking for feedback. This is one of those things that we just love to get feedback from you, the audience, in terms of how did we do? Are these things interesting and valuable to you? What other things would you like us to talk about and bring back, to our creative team and understand how do our customers need to be informed? So please, please, please tell us how we did. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you want to know more about. With that, we've got 1 minute left. Sarah, any final comments, any parting words?
Anything GitHub does is powered by the community, and I want to keep sharing that because I think that's one of the biggest value adds that we provide today. So that's how I want to end it today, Keith. Have a good day, everybody. Keith, I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome. And as always, thank you everybody for joining us today. Remember to git commit